With most of technology focused on artificial intelligence, you might be wondering if it's time to take what you know as a developer and level up to stay relevant. So I've got just the expert for this. Today I'm talking to Matt Harrison, a software engineer, corporate trainer, and expert on Python. He's written a number of books on machine learning, pandas, and even something called XGBoost. I have no idea. Now, he's a popular speaker at conferences like PyCon, OSCON, and has trained companies like HP, Adobe, Samsung, and others. Matt, you have a lot of experience with Python, but I also noticed that you've worked with tools like React Native, Django, Docker, and lots of other stuff. Can you talk a little bit about your developer journey and maybe the state of some of the opportunities for the different programming languages in this age where everybody's just really talking about AI?
Sure. Yeah. So my background is I have a computer science degree, and
Mhm.
out of school, I worked kind of as a data scientist, but that was back in 2000, before data science as a name really existed. But I was doing natural language processing for a small startup that competed with Google, and um, and then over the years, I did some back end development work. At that first job, I came across Python and kind of fell in love with the language. At the time, I was more of a Perl person, and I was tasked to work with a person who used the Tickle language, TCL.
Mhm.
And neither one of us wanted to use the other tool, and so Python was a compromise. And it sort of fit with my brain, and I've stuck with it ever since. And it's I think Python is in a great place right now. Is it the one best tool for everything? I like to say that Python, well, a lot of people say this, Python is the second best tool for a lot of things. And so because it fits in a lot of realms, it happens to be quite useful.
That's pretty awesome. So, talk a little bit about maybe your transition from being a developer to sort of a corporate trainer, or getting into that. I know that for me, it's just a personal challenge to stay current as somebody who trains for a living, to stay current with everything that's going on. So, how do you manage like staying up to date?
Yeah. So let me talk about my transition first, and
Hmm.
then I'll talk about staying up to date. Uh, as I was working in various companies, I was like, I don't want to be the person in the chair at the conference talk. I want to be the person giving the conference talk. And I guess that's just my
Hmm.
personality. And so I started doing talks. I started doing a bunch of training at um, conferences, giving tutorials, that
Hmm.
sort of thing, and that led to my first book. I gave a tutorial, and I was accepted to give that tutorial again. And I was like, well, instead of just rewriting my slides, I'll write a book. Um, and so that book happened, and that was at the time where self-publishing was just starting to happen. That was in 2011. And I think there's just a confluence of, like, I was being at a lot of Python conferences, writing books about it and teaching. And so there started to be an influx of interest in people wanting training. And that's how I got into training. So I've always liked helping people. Like, I paid for college doing tutoring, and my mom is a teacher, so I really feel uh, a lot of satisfaction, like seeing people learn how to do things in better ways, or helping them advance. And so that was my transition to corporate training. Um, Along the way, I have done a lot of consulting as well,
Hmm.
and so that consulting can keep you somewhat up to date, or you can specialize in certain things. But staying up to date is a challenge. And I don't think this is a challenge that's unique to corporate trainers. I think this is a challenge for everyone, right? Uh, you know, I like, as a corporate trainer, I'm looking at education, how to teach people sort of the latest and greatest. But, I saw in like universities, there are a lot of universities who are like, oh, we need to start teaching Python, and they will just take like their Java or their C++ material and like change some things so it's Python like, but they're not really teaching Python per se. They're teaching, some weird version of Python as if it were Java, or C++ as if it were Python. So, finding someone who really wants to dig into to the bits of stuff can be a challenge. So uh, there is a balance. What do I want to focus on? What do I kind of want to ignore? As I said, I did do a lot of backend stuff. Like I've done Django, I've done some React Native stuff, and I've sort of let that slide. Like I don't know that my brain is big enough to like stay on top of sort of the backend web development type stuff, and do more of the data sciencey, machine learning type stuff that interests me. Um, I think a lot of people need to find what motivates them, and there's some tricks and things that you can do to find what motivates them. I think one tool that's been useful for me is writing books and creating content, right? And sharing that content with others is a great way to learn it yourself, but also uh, there's a certain, I guess, attitude online where if something is incorrect, people like to correct that, and so you will be corrected pretty quickly if you start sharing things that aren't correct online. So yeah, I think my mechanism for staying up to date is a lot of research, and then just sharing that content with others.
Yeah, I can certainly relate. I think that I always say that you don't really know something until you try to at least explain it to someone else, and that sort of, I mean, I think that the teaching and the coding are two separate skills. I feel like most people, I've gone to a lot of talks where the person who is given the talk is very knowledgeable, and especially when I understand what they're talking about, it's difficult to understand it in the way that they're presenting it. So I think that like actually knowing the stuff and being able to teach the stuff don't always go together, or they're not the same thing. And so it's really great. I think that passion of trying to help others is really something that is going to help you, I don't know, become a better at what you do. So I think that looking for opportunities, and you can get started by just, there's usually lots of meetups that people do. Everybody's always looking for, um, you know, people to give talks. That's a great opportunity for anybody who's trying to learn things. Make yourself explain it, and even, as somebody who's, has a ton of courses. I think it's over 100 courses that I've done. I feel like when I make myself teach something, that's really when I know it deeply, because, as you said, the worst thing that can happen is that you teach something that's wrong. People will definitely catch you on it. So, having that dedication to really research it is really what makes a great teacher. And also, I think, in a way, remembering what it's like not to know something. I think that that's something that I think sometimes is missing. That people
Yeah.
forget what it was like when they didn't know something. I don't know if you've run into those kind of situations.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who, like, especially during COVID, I started geeking out a lot on like the cognitive side of learning, because I had to do a
Hmm.
lot of, going from like in person to remote. I wanted to like double down on that, but I think there is a, a, a skill to teaching where it's not just
Hmm.
if you know something. A lot of people are very knowledgeable on something, but they don't really come to it from a student point of view, and so they can glaze over things that people don't understand, or just make assumptions that uh, the students, they'll be completely lost very quickly because of assumptions that someone who's not putting themselves into the foot of a student will have. So that is something that I think is, that saying, teach it to a 5-year-old, you really do need to kind of not just gloss over certain aspects, but make sure that you
That's a
are
great
filling.
ChatGPT
You, you, need,
prompt.
you, need,
Teach it.
you need to know your audience. Yeah, I'll say
Yeah.
that. Yeah, make sure you know
Yeah,
your
and I think
audience.
that I had one person one time tell me, "Don't you want like the person that knows something the best to teach it to you?" And I said, "I think you want the person that is going to help you understand it the best. Like that's the best kind of person to learn from. Somebody that knows it, but they understand how you need to be able to consume it." And so that, that's I
Yeah.
think really important. So a lot of people checking in from all over the place. Just want to acknowledge some folks here. So there's Mark from Boston, somebody from London, all over the place. So this is pretty cool. Let's see. We are somebody calling in from Dubai. So Edmund and Victoria, North Carolina, India, Romania.
Wow.
We are getting around here all over the world.
Nice.
So, and I know you're in Utah and I'm in Florida. So, and there's more people dropping in from lots of places. So, and, Victoria said something nice that she completely agrees. I learned a lot, training teams and having a little bit of input is priceless. Yeah. If you really want to know something, explain it to somebody else, teach it, write a blog post, you know, do something that helps you have to process it in a special way. So we have more people dropping in from Germany, New York City, Egypt. Wow, everywhere. So that's great.
Wow.
It's good to see. I
Hey, everyone.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Appreciate the attendance. So this is cool, Serbia. So let's keep going. What do you think are talking about GPT? We kind of got a little bit started with it. So what do you think are some of the most important things that a developer should learn today about GPT and generative AI?
Yeah. I think, well, I mean, this just apply. Like I teach, I'm doing a machine learning course for one of my clients this week, and
Hmm.
I think that everyone needs to be able to write code to do machine learning. No, I don't, but I think it is useful. Like I wish that people in school, like in high school, were required to take like they're required to take math. I think they should be required to take at least a basic programming class, a statistics class, and I think a machine learning class at a basic level would actually be really useful because they would understand the world that they live in, right? I mean,
Hmm.
what when you go to YouTube or whatever, they are basically running the program that's feeding the algorithm, and like it or not, we're living in that world. So I think a basic understanding of how these things work, that how that phone works in front of you, is useful. Um, I also think people need to be aware of like where the data is coming from, and
Mm-hmm.
what biases are in the data. So for if you're using like GPT, like at least you know that like you don't have information after a certain point in time, at least right now, and that can impact the answers that it says. Another thing that's important to be aware about, like I said, how these things work, but also that like they can hallucinate, right? And the mechanism for delivering a result is basically like we're aggregating all this information that we've read, and now we're trying to like basically predict what comes next, and that prediction might look good and read good and sound very confident, but might be completely incorrect. So I think that's a place where a lot of people can get stuck, or especially if you don't have that expertise of what's going on, that
Hmm.
can lead you down a a slippery slope. And
And
then going back to your other point, like this stuff is changing so quickly, right? That it's
mhm.
like you got to be staying on top of that is a challenge in and of itself.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, I like that you do mention people have to sort of understand what the issues are and perhaps make sure that they know how to talk to the GPT and understand that it's really, I mean, they aptly named it ChatGPT because it is a conversation that you're having. One of the things that happened recently is this issue with some Samsung workers accidentally leaking trade secrets via ChatGPT. That was kind of something that's been in the news lately. And just to understand that the conversations that you're having are also training, are used to train the models. And that means that, you're basically potentially leaking some internal company IP if you don't understand that that there is some sharing of information happening with a very experimental type of model. That's why you need to start thinking about ethical issues. Start using it, of course, because it is really useful, but understand the potential issues. I think that's probably something that people don't think about. They see the new thing, and there's other types of generative AI out there like Midjourney. So understand that if you're uploading photos, that you're sharing that data with everyone, and that data can surface in certain places later on because you're basically not just interacting with the model, but you're also training the model, and those
Yep.
are really important. So a lot of the stuff that's been happening is really been coalescing over languages like Python in the AI industry. As a Python expert and professional, why do you think Python is so, I don't know, it seems to be the first thing that the OpenAI API, has examples for? Why is it Python and not something different like Rust or C or anything else?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say in a word, my answer to that would be a library called NumPy. And
NumPy, huh?
yeah, let me sort of explain that. Python is a slow language. So how the object model works in Python, everything is an object. There's a lot of overhead to that. And that makes it pretty easy to use, but it also makes it relatively slow. And so this NumPy library, which came out in the mid 2000s, is basically saying, hey, we want to use Python to do numerical calculations, but Python as a language is slow. So how can we get around that? Well, we can use Python as an abstraction around a buffer of memory. And instead of having a bunch of Python numbers, we'll just say we have 10,000 8-bit integers or 64-bit integers, and use NumPy as a way to take advantage of like modern CPU architectures and SIMD instructions. And then when we do math operations on that NumPy array, if we're using the right abstractions, we're basically approaching C speeds and C memory
Hmm.
usage with that. And so NumPy allows you to uh, basically get very close to C with Python. And then there's been a whole bunch of infrastructure or whatnot built on top of that. So things like Pandas, scikit-learn, et cetera, built on top of that, such that a lot of people were like, oh, we now have this language that's relatively easy to approach, Python, and we have libraries that are relatively easy to use. And we can use them writing Python code. We don't have to write C code or Fortran code,
Hmm.
but we basically get pretty good speed and memory usage from doing that. We don't pay that Python penalty too much by using that, and so that's I think put us in a place where we are today, where Python is really popular among data scientists, data analysts, people who are doing data. I mean, Python's also popular. Like I said, it's kind of the second best language for everything. You can do data science with like things like R. You can do web applications or backend with JavaScript or Java. You can also do that with Python. You can control websites using tools like Bash or Ruby, but you can also do that with Python as well. So Python's kind of in this sweet spot where it does a lot of things that developers and technical people and even people who aren't developers per se, it enables them to do. And at this point in time, Python, like if you go to the Python package index, that's pypi.org, uh, you'll see that there's the last time I checked, there was over 400,000 different packages available for Python. So literally, yeah, right there, and that number on
Wow.
the lower left, yeah, you can see it says like 400, yeah, right there, 400,000 packages plus that you can leverage, right? So these, some of these are academic and some of these are toy projects, but a lot of these are packages that are being used in industry for cutting edge stuff. So yeah, it kind of makes sense. A lot of the data scientists are using Python for as sort of the lingua franca of data,
Hmm.
and it makes sense to just sort of stay in that environment rather than to switch to different languages if you don't have to.
So that's actually a fantastic second language for somebody to learn. I agree with you. I haven't used it clearly anywhere nearly as much as you have, but I find it very approachable. I'm not a big fan of the indentation thing. That always kind of frustrates me. But you get over it. And if you've used something else, like I've done shell scripting, that language is so crazy that I'm finding myself use it for the type of things I would do for shell scripting because it seems to be always accessible and available everywhere. Python, and it's super easy to pick up. It makes sense. It's really solid. It's probably like you said. I love that analogy of it's the second best language for anything. I know that I come from a newspaper background, so I know that Django is like a really great platform for building like web type things. And Yeah, it seems like a just an easy to learn language, and it can do a lot. And now it's probably burst into the limelight with all the AI things being done in the language. Probably because of those same reasons that it's just easy for somebody to learn. Like you said, it approaches C like speeds, and C is not a fun language to get started with. Whereas with like Python, you can get started pretty quickly with some simple things. So speaking of that, I always suggest that people learn by doing something, start creating a project. So what sort of things would you say might be approachable for somebody who perhaps is just getting started with learning Python?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I one of the classes I teach is like a fundamentals of Python class, and I tell my students like after these 3 days, like if you were to go and evaluate yourself on like popular evaluation programs online, you would be evaluated as highly proficient in Python. And a lot of them are like, I don't know that that's the case. And it's like, well, the knowledge that you've had and based on my interactions with you in this course indicate that is the case. However, you might not feel like comfortable like going out and like calling yourself a Python programmer per se, right? And I
Hmm.
say like
Hmm.
now that you have this baseline knowledge, your chore is to go and practice, right?
Hmm.
And so you know, I get DMs all the time from people who are like, tell me what to practice on, and I get a little bit frustrated with that because I think this is a question of motivation, and this is one of those cognitive areas where you need to like be able to find something that will motivate you. So this is my general rule of thumb, but again, like sort of the same thing. Like if I want to work out, what's a good way to work out? Well, I mean, you can sort of force yourself to work out for a while, but like there are hacks that you can do to make yourself work out better, right? Like you can pay someone to be your trainer, right? And if you
Hmm.
invest in money into something, you're going to take it more seriously. Or you can get a social group and say we're going to go running every 3 days a week, right? And we've set a date, and there's going to be three of us there. You don't want to let down the group, and so
Hmm.
you can kind of do similar things with learning something, right? You can pay someone to do something. You can do it with someone else. Those might tend to be a little bit more money intensive or time intensive than people might uh, want to accept. But I think if you really want to learn something, you've got to make the investment to do that. Let me maybe give some things that aren't maybe as expensive. One thing I'll tell students is find something work related, right? So oftentimes I have students who are using like a different tool at work, and now they want to use Python. I'm like, well, this is a great thing to do, but your work just paid for you to learn Python. Your next project, instead of doing it in whatever tool you prefer to use or you've used in the past, do it in Python. And it might be a little bit slower, or you might come into some bumps along the way, but that's where you start practicing it. And once you start practicing it, that's going to make it easier. So I think that's a great way, like work. what's the incentive with work? Then generally you have a deadline, right?
Hmm.
And so that can be a good sort of carrot hanging over you to force you to like learn that. Another thing that I found that people like to help them learn is finding something that I would call hobby related, right? And this is why like I don't like people coming and asking me like what should I look at, and I'm like, I mean, I could tell you what's interesting to me, but that might not be at all be interesting to you, right? And
Hmm.
so like I live in Utah, I like to ski, so I'll often like pull up like snow data and look at like snowfalls and like look how ski seasons have looked over time, right? Which to me is interesting and fascinating, but like to people who live in a tropical climate or whatnot, they're like, who cares,
Yeah,
right?
and
That's like
not so good in Florida.
yeah.
Not so useful in Florida, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
find something that has an intrinsic interest to you, right? And so,
Hmm.
if it is skiing, I mean, maybe it's like doing some reporting or some machine learning modeling on skiing. But if you're not interested in that, maybe you're in Florida, you need to look at hurricane models or something like that, or beach, whatever that would be, right? Find something that's interesting to you that will allow you to keep doing it, rather than like, here's something that someone told me to do, I'm going to spend an hour looking at it one time, and then it's like, I'm not interested in that, I'm not going to do it anymore.
Yeah,
Those can
those are
be some
fantastic
great ways
buckets. I
to
mean,
practice. Yeah.
yeah, I like that. Like solve some sort of problem that you have personally that will really motivate you. I know that whenever I would need to learn a new program or I wanted to learn a new program, I would always, back when I did more desktop publishing and graphic arts, I would always say, okay, the next project I'm going to do in whatever program I want to learn. And it would just force you to learn the thing because you needed to. And I call it like it's always easy to learn, I don't know, 15% of something that you already know how to do. So if you are, sort of solving a problem that you've solved with like a bash script before, if you know how to solve that problem, but now you make yourself do it in something like Python, that's fantastic because you already know how to do it. It's just that you need to learn the lingo. And a lot of these programming languages is just learning how do the loops go. With Python, it's like how does the indentation work? Bash is so funny because it's like you program with like if and then you do fee and the loops are crazy. So I think that you'll find that it's a lot more enjoyable when you have some sort of target. If you're doing any sort of automation, I mean, Python appears to be fantastic at processing large amounts of data. So I definitely am going to. I'm doing a project where I'm doing like a GitHub action that's basically creating a like the RSS feed for these live streams that I do, so that I can put them up on iTunes. That's a great sort of project. Like you have something that you need to do, you can do it in like three other languages, but try it on this. And I think that the amazing thing about it is that you'll find that it's super easy to pick up as that's why people love it so much. So what about tools? I don't know if you've been using things like ChatGPT or Copilot or other coding assistants. What are your thoughts on that whole world? Have you used them? Do you find them useful at all? What do you think about a beginner maybe looking at that into those tools?
Yeah, great question. So have I used them? Yes, I have used them. Are they useful? Yes. I mean, they can certainly augment and help you. So let me give an example. Like I said, I teach a fundamentals of Python class, and one of the projects that we do at the end of that is a little bit more involved. It's like almost 200 lines of code, and we make a little tool. We make a command line wrapper for it. It talks to the internet. We write tests for it. It downloads things from the internet. And so I was able to use ChatGPT to basically write that for me, right? And so this tool that takes a few hours to write, in the course of a few minutes, I was able to prompt ChatGPT to create that whole code for me. Um, so, and the anecdote might be like, okay, so will programmers not exist in the future? And I don't buy that at all. I don't think people need to be afraid of losing their job per se. Um, What I do think this means is that if I am an expert, I can leverage this to be more productive. And again, like I said, I sort of deep dove into like how brains work and how learning works when COVID hit, just to like
Mhm.
double down and make myself like a more effective teacher if I could. And most people have very limited amounts of capacity in their brain, like your working memory. There's this notion of 7 ± 2, uh, like 7 pieces of information ± 2 is like how much you can store in your brain at a certain time. And there's also a limited capacity of how much deep work you can do. And
Mhm.
so if I can offload some of that capacity into chat or Copilot or something like that, then that's awesome, right? It just gives
Mhm.
me more time and more brain power to work on things that are better. However, um, if I'm not aware of what it's doing, or if I'm not able to prompt it correctly, if I don't know sort of the tricks or understand programming such that I can do that, I can spend all my time fighting with it to create something that will compile or work or run or whatever that might never work. And it might be more effort to do that than it is to actually just sit down and write it on my own. So um, I do think the tools are useful. Like I said, I use them. As a beginner, I would be careful about the notion that like I don't need to learn anything now because Chat GPT will do this all for me. Um, I do think you should find, and maybe if you're creative about prompting, Chat
Mhm.
GPT can like walk you through and teach you all of these things, right? I I would think that you'd have to be very creative and about that. But I would say find a resource that's going to help you understand Python or whatever you want. Make sure you have a basic knowledge of that, and then start leveraging these tools to augment your capabilities rather than using them as sort of like I don't need to learn anything. I'll just use
Mhm.
AI to do it for me.
So I'll tell you how I sort of have been using it recently. I think that it's very useful at the beginning because it is a chat engine to sort of ask it to brainstorm ideas with you. So for an application, so I tend to use it. I tend to use the chat GPT part at the very beginning where I am thinking about how to build something and just have a conversation with it. I also have used it successfully to do things like when I need to like mock up some data. I just need some data to sort of test out some sort of thing that I've already built, or I need it to just. It's fantastic for brainstorming ideas. So where we like you mentioned where it's hard for us to come up with like 10 ideas for something. Whereas GPT, even if they're bad ideas, it can do 100, no problem. And then you can say,
Yep.
give me another 200. And then you can start to like have a conversation about what those hundreds ideas should focus on. Or you can take like here's a one that I like, and we let's talk about this idea, and then you can start maybe doing some pseudocode and learning to build with it. So it's fantastic for brainstorming. Also
Yeah.
summarizing, I think a lot of times. I don't know if you've run into those kind of things
Yeah,
when using
I
it.
have. I can give some concrete examples of where
Mm,
I've used it. Right. One is taking existing code and writing it in a different language. Right.
mm-hmm,
So you could say I want to rewrite this Bash script as Python. It tends to be pretty good at doing things like that. Another is, like you said, summarizing.
mm-hmm,
So one of the eternal debates of developers is how much comment you put in your code. Some people are like, you need to comment all your code. Other people are like, the code is the comment. Um, and so I mean, chat makes that like, you want to comment your code, you drop in the code there and say write comments for this. It will write comments for it. You want to write, Python has a notion of a doc stream which is
mm-hmm,
documentation that you can attach to methods or functions, and then you can inspect them from your editor. You can say write the doc string for this, it will write the doc string for that. For those who are using typing in Python, Python 3 has the notion of a type system that you can make type annotations. You can say annotate this code with types. It can do that relatively well. Writing tests for code, you can say write a test for this function of code. It can do that relatively well. So those are all places where, in addition, like as a person who creates content online, yeah, certainly brainstorming, helping to create content, that sort of thing. But from a pure coding point of view, there are lots of aspects around coding, the documentation, testing your code, understanding your code, in addition to just creating code, where it is super useful.
Yeah, that's definitely the case for me as well. That I hadn't thought about commenting, and it is really good at commenting code. It's really, like you said, it's not something that you maybe, I don't know, sometimes you feel like it's the sort of thing that is a pain to do, but it's if you want it to help you there. I think that that's kind of like any sort of repetitive task that you have. That's the kind of thing that GPT can really help you. And commenting is great. I don't know if you've used it for testing, but perhaps that could be another future sort of way that it can help people. Let's talk about the fact that we have all these Copilot type tools now, and they're coming out in things like Excel and Word and other things. You are used to taking a lot of data with things like Jupyter Notebook and Python, and being able to process that data through computer programming. How do you see AI affecting something like that? Because with things like Excel getting Copilot, I see perhaps a time where a lot of data analysis is the kind of thing that something like GPT can do.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think, yeah, certainly you could say point GPT at like a database schema, and say like write a SQL query that will answer this question, right? Or you could probably say write pandas code that will answer this question, or you could probably say take this pandas code and rewrite it as SQL. I haven't tried that, but I would imagine that it would probably do a decent job of that. Um, so, I mean, I'll say this: like, no code solutions have been around for a long time. And the idea that like someone who's not a programmer can like whip up something, um, and have it work for them. Um, I've had like clients that I've done work with who have sort of like gone down the no code route. For simple things, they can often work and make your life easy. For more complex things, they kind of make it more difficult and or not work at all. And I think right now, Chat GPT can do a lot of the simple stuff. Some of the more complex stuff, it might hallucinate or give you an answer that's not correct. Um, I would imagine that it can help that analysis in the future, and probably can be a great like brainstorming partner, or uh, like sort of like a co-pilot in that like you could say, oh, it might say, did you consider doing this, or you might want to go down, check out this path as well. um, I think those things are useful. Again, I'm not of the idea that like chat will make programming go away. Will it make data analysis go away? I don't think so either. Like I
Hmm.
think that will still be around. Um, Generally, like I use a calculator.
Hmm.
I use spell checkers, and so why wouldn't I use something that augments my output and makes my output better, um, and then be able to work on things that are more difficult or more of a challenge, or drive this to automate other things for me. So, um, yeah, do I see tooling come? I mean, certainly there are tools that will come out and do analysis for you. Um, I guess the challenge is going to be like how do you integrate those? How do you make sure that they're doing the right thing? They can be useful, but right now I still think that you want to be an expert and make sure
Hmm.
that you can backstop or make sure that the hallucinations or this isn't driving you down the wrong path or giving you the wrong answer, and you're just taking that for granted.
I think that definitely, if you are concerned about like maybe the future and what developers are going to be doing, you should try some of the tools because you can definitely see with hallucinations, that they're not perfect. But also, if you try to get a specific result, especially with some of the generative AI, like artwork type programs, if you ask Midjourney to give you the thing that you have in your head, what you'll find is that it gives you something, but it's not the thing that you had in your head. And that I feel that the problem with that is that a lot of times what you really want is what's on your head. And to get those sort of results, those are only going to come from somebody who really understands the questions. I think that it can save a lot of time. It can get you, part of the way there. But if you really want specific answers, you're going to still need a programmer. Maybe you'll be able to get to those things faster. But if you don't, it's better to understand the problem and learn how to get the computer to do some things for you, or brainstorm with you, or summarize for you, or get you to a place in the data and maybe write some starter code. But if you get, say like 80% of the answer, you're going to need that 20% to come from somebody who knows what they're doing. And I think that that's kind of where I see things going. So let's talk specifically about that. What about the future? What's your sort of I don't know, like forget about where it is now, but maybe think about like 5 or 10 years from now. Which developer jobs or tasks do you think are going to be, say, the most affected, and what should those programmers start thinking about doing?
Yeah. Things are moving very quickly right now. So I mean, I don't know that I feel confident predicting the future. I, I guess, but my advice would be like, um, I would want to make sure that I understand what's going on. And so,
Hmm.
if I'm a JavaScript person, or if I'm a React person, or if I'm a database administrator person, or whatever what I'm interested in, or where I see my career going, I would want to understand what the AI can do for me right now. What are the
Hmm.
limitations of that? And then augment my skills around those limitations, and then
Hmm.
leverage the AI for what it can optimize for me, right? And so um, right now, like
Yeah,
you said,
I do
AI is
think,
good for
yeah.
stubbing out things, giving you sort of boilerplate for starting out. Can you say, like, write this complete app that does this? I mean, a lot of us saw the demonstration where they said, here's a napkin with like a
Hmm.
website, go and write that website, which was certainly impressive, but they didn't write like, here's a YouTube website, go and write this, right? And it didn't go out and write YouTube. Um,
Right.
so I think we do need to be aware of the limitations, uh, and I would double down on sort of the higher level skills and the limitations, and make sure I understand those. I think maybe the more challenging part is for maybe someone who's a junior, or even looking to get their first job. Um, that might, if I can. If I'm telling a junior to go out and do certain tasks, and like I'm writing this in an email, and it's like I could send this email to chat and it would do
Hmm.
this for me. Um, that might seem a little bit scary, right? And so I do think people who are like, I'll just use chat and I won't learn anything. That's a scary proposition. I do think you want to make sure that you are learning. Um, doesn't mean you have to be learning everything, but I would be exploring chat, or exploring AI. I keep saying chat,
Hmm.
but exploring AI, exploring sort of the periphery of what it's able to do, what it's not able to do, and then I would double down on things that are somewhat unique to human capabilities, to make sure that I can that my job
Hmm.
isn't obsolete.
That's right. Yeah. So definitely, regardless of what language you understand, you need to be exploring how this thing can help you, get there quicker, how it can assist you, what it doesn't do. So if you haven't tried it, even something like Copilot, seeing what it can do, I think those are just, I mean, this is why you learned all kinds of languages to stay relevant. You don't want to
Yeah.
be, I don't know, the last person using punch cards or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, if your
Although,
head is in the sand, yeah, if your head is in the sand and you're like, yeah, I'll just sort of wait and see how this plays out right now.
mm,
I think you really should consider like trying these things out and seeing what they can do. I get that like authors or
mhm.
there's uproars about people writing books and like, oh, this is going to put authors out of business, or people wrote books that have art that's completely generated by AI, and the artists are upset that they'll go out of business or whatnot. Um, yeah, you should see what it can do, and 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 also see how it can help you, right? I mean, these things
Mhm.
are very powerful, and if you aren't taking advantage of them or learning how to take advantage of them, I think you will be replaced by someone who can take advantage of them. That would be
That's
my
true.
thought around that.
Yeah, Mike actually mentioned that you will not lose your job to AI. You will lose it to some developers who are leveraging all of these tools because it does make you faster and able to do more. And the way that I describe it is, remember when shipping used to take like 4 to 6 weeks. And now, if you don't get something within a couple days, it's really a horrible experience. So what we got when we figured out how to do shipping better was more shipping. In the same way, like when we have tools that make us do more developer, we're going to get more development, like more. So I think there could probably be more of a demand. Think about how many more people are employed in delivery now than were ever employed before. It was just one company, the post office, doing everything, and now we have lots of people delivering, doing last mile delivery, that sort of thing. I think that this could open up an opportunity. Think about spreadsheets. Even like when spreadsheets first came out, did we get less accountants? No, we got more. We got more. Like we solved bigger problems. So I think that those are some of the things that we're going to see. And that's why, like you, I think I have a sort of a positive outlook in the future. So, what about this sort of ability of the GPTs and other AIs being able to pass things like lead code tests? Now, as a teacher and somebody who trains in a corporate environment, so where do you see like skill validation going? Is that going to be harder? Is it what are what? How's that going to work in the future?
Yeah, I mean, part of your question is like how interviews work, and
Hmm.
typically job interviews have this notion of like, we're going to put you through the ringer and make sure that you can do these certain types of coding, whether or not they're actually relevant or applicable to the job. That's just what everyone does. Um, yeah, and so at least my understanding, and I haven't played around specifically with this, is like at least for the more simple types of these leak code problems, um, AI can do them relatively
Hmm.
easily. Um, and I mean, cheating, you'll always find people who are cheating, right? And so
Hmm.
I think eventually that will be exposed. So I don't know that like you necessarily want to go out of your way to like um, focus on the cheating per se, but um,
Yeah, I think you can't really prevent people from using these tools. I see that a lot, like universities and people saying, "Oh, we're going to ban GPT." You saw Italy actually ban GPT or Chat or OpenAI ChatGPT from its usage. I mean, like you said, you don't want to stick your hand in the sand. You want to see what they can do, see how they can help.
yeah,
Put guardrails around things. I think that sort of a, I don't know, desire to control. It's not never gonna work. It never works.
yeah. Well, I mean, the sad truth is that like chat can write an essay better than 80% of high school seniors. So,
That's right.
I mean, if you have a tool that in 30 seconds can write an essay better than most of you and your friends, um, why would you not use that? And
Mm,
I think, sadly, a lot of tech interviews are sort of similar to that, where we put people in a situation that's not at all how they're work will be, right? Like you're developing this on your own, using your own brain power without any outside assistance. Where in practice, you're working with others, you're collaborating with them, you'll have access to cheap AI tools to do this as well. Um, so I'll try and go not really. I just say that is what it is, right? I will say more as like a teacher and a trainer, like how do I see validation going? And again, from my point of view, you know, I'm going to say like I think it's important to have the base understanding. I think if you don't have base understanding of certain technology, like using AI tools isn't necessarily going to help you so much. So you do
Hmm.
want that. So I don't see that that's putting like me as a corporate trainer out of a job. Um, uh, as far as like skill validation, I mean, skill validation is kind of a hard thing in and of itself, and I think people will game whatever metric you want. I do like to say like, when I'm teaching in person, it's pretty easy for me to like after a day or so of being with a class, I can rank order people and say like these people are the most proficient in what I'm teaching.
Hmm.
Does that mean that they're going to be the best colleagues to work with? I mean, there are other things that go into that as well, right? And so I do think a well-rounded developer or an employee, is someone who not only can take advantage of technology and is efficient with their time, but is also someone who works well with others, right? And I don't necessarily know that, just because you can use Chat GPT, that's necessarily indicative of you being a good employee per se.
Yeah, that's true, and I think that it's definitely changing everything. And for me, I find that I use it best to do things around my training. Help me promote courses. Sometimes it's great for like a thumbnail. So yeah, use it as much as you can and see what it does for you. So talk about some of the things that you. I know you have a website. I guess Metasnake. .com is the website where you have a lot of your stuff. What do you have there, and what are some things that people should look, uh, you know, whether it's you that are doing it or other things that you're training? You've written a bunch of books, like for example. So, what do you want people to know about?
Sure. Yeah. Metasnake.com, that's sort of my corporate site. So folks who are looking for corporate training, getting their team up to speed, that sort of
Hmm.
thing can go there. And then I have a store attached to that. And so folks who want one-off on-demand courses or books, I have that around there. And then I'm also available on other platforms as well, like LinkedIn Learning. Just released a course on LinkedIn Learning. um, Actually looking to do another course on LinkedIn Learning as well. So, um,
So that
yeah,
course is really interested on LinkedIn. It was like a course that is focused on finance. Can you talk a
mhm.
little bit about kind of your approach there and why you kind of went after that specific market?
Yeah. So as we mentioned, Python is pretty big in a lot of places, and one place where there's a lot of data and a lot of like interest around modeling and machine learning is in finance. And so there's a lot of use of. I mean, some of the biggest deployments of Python are financial institutions. So that's a place where there's a lot of demand for Python. And my experience, like, so one of the books I wrote is this Effective Pandas book, which this book, Pandas is a tool for it is kind of like Excel for Python,
Hmm.
manipulating tabular data. And I have some pretty strong opinions about how people should use Pandas. And and so you can sort of think of that course as me applying my opinions around a particular use case of like looking at financial data, right? And so I think people who are interested in financial data or sort of looking to move from Excel to Python are going to find that course useful. Also, people who aren't necessarily even interested in financial data, but are really looking at like how does someone who's looking at this data what's their thought process as they're going through it? How do they optimize their code? How do they debug their code? Uh, this is going to be a concrete example of doing that from a finance aspect.
Yeah, it sounds like a real practical sort of use for this type of technology. So I really enjoyed that about that approach. I never seen that before. And you know, having worked at a newspaper, I know that one of the strongest things that we did was data analysis, and then you know our graphics department was able to you know convert that and make it into something very visual. So I really like that that course existed. So I can't wait for your next course as well. Fantastic content. I watched a little bit of your finance course, but it wasn't enough for me to really understand. Like I don't know enough about Jupyter notebooks, although that looks amazing, and I didn't know enough to I think get the most out of it. So super cool. Thank you so much for coming. I think we have maybe a couple of questions that we can answer before we run out of time.
Okay.
So let me
Yeah.
see. I have, first of all, Adam just wanted to say you found a fellow Utaher in here. So,
Hi,
so good
Adam.
to see people. Yeah, good to see people coming in from different places. And let's see, you know, talking about being able to work on projects that are meaningful to you. I like space stuff. And so he did a project using a meteor strike data set. That's super interesting. It's basically used any practical purposes, but it was a great way to learn five of different things. That's awesome. I mean, that's actually exactly what you were talking about, right? Find something that
Yeah.
you're passionate about. So
Yep.
important.
Yeah. Useless for others, but like probably super useful for Adam as they're trying that out. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's
And
useful if it's helping you, you know, learn something. That's a fantastic use. Yeah, we also had Victoria also mentioned that let's see, she is learning how useful ChatGPT can be. I'm learning how useful ChatGPT can be in job hunting. It really helps when you get mental blog writing, covers, letters. So talk a little bit about you know how relevant do you think it would be for somebody looking for a job out there to have something like not necessarily ChatGPT, but all of these new things that you're doing? Do you find is there like a
um,
huge market for these jobs now?
as far as like, is there a market for prompt engineering, or can
Yeah, yeah.
chat help me
What
find a
kind of
job?
yeah? Well, ChatGPT. Yeah, I guess it's like a really cool thing for actually job searching. I know that we released a tool now that helps you on LinkedIn. Like you know, one of the things that I struggle with is like how do I write my accomplishments? That's a fantastic thing. I mean,
Yep.
for somebody like me who you know who's English isn't my first language, so that's really helpful because that's one area where it can definitely do a better job than me. Um, you know, so.
Even where English is your first language, right? And I'm
Mhm.
someone who's written multiple books. It's like, um, if I need to write copy or if I need to write a cover letter, right, it can crank that out, and it looks pretty good. Like I said, it's going to be better than most high school seniors could write. But you can also like riff on that. You can say like, well, let's write this in a more persuasive way or in a more tongue in cheek way, and it will do that for you. And so, does that mean that you should just wholesale copy and paste that? I mean, maybe.
Mhm.
Generally, when I've created content derived from AI. It's been, I would say, heavily inspired by the AI, but have also generally heavily edited afterwards to put sort of a spin on it that I like. Yeah, so I mean, but I think you can also, as far as like, if you're interested in like job hunting, like you, from the brainstorming aspect, right? You could say like, let's list uh, 20 companies that are
Mhm.
relevant around whatever aspect, right? And then and sort of use that to brainstorm maybe companies that you should apply to. Uh, you could use that to do some outreach as well. Um, Certainly, things that you could do. I'm a huge fan of publishing content and getting content out there, not just like for job searching, but I think your job search will be more effective if you have something you can point to, like a portfolio or a website
Mhm.
or that sort of thing. And so if you can leverage, any of these things that can like minimize that friction to get started on a project that's going to make your job prospects better. You know,
Yeah, definitely like personalizing like maybe your cover letters to the specific individuals. I think they always say that. I know like a couple of weeks ago I met with Logan Kilpatrick from OpenAI, and he mentioned that he applied 500 times to his first like a machine learning job. And so I can imagine he would have found it handy to have something like GPT that can help with a lot of that writing
yeah,
and applying.
well,
So cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I just want to mention next week we have Burke Holland coming into the show. He's a principal developer advocate at Microsoft who's focusing on Visual Studio Code. So we're going to be talking about how that product is developed and also what's happening as they attempt to integrate tools like ChatGPT. So one of the big things is, I don't know if you've seen, Copilot X is the sort of the next generation of Copilot, basically adding the ChatGPT features into the popular editors. That should be pretty awesome. So thank you so much, Matt, for coming. I appreciate your time, and make sure you check out Matt's LinkedIn page. Our URLs are there at the bottom, and we'll see you next week. Take care.
my pleasure. Thanks, Ray.